supposed to say 2 and 1.
Well, you said that live, so congratulations.
That's exactly it. I took a shit on your podcast. That's all right. Somebody else did that to me earlier.
Well, welcome to live radio, everybody. Live internet radio. Welcome to the Mustache Mafia podcast, making kind of a triumphal return of doing my own content. I'm here joined with Brenton Lengel, who is a poet, playwright, and the author of Snow White Zombie Apocalypse, whose line I just totally stole because he kind of gave away some radio magic just now. We're here tonight to discuss Cyberpunk 2077, late capitalism, and how science fiction reflects the society that produced it. And I'm a little late on this one because I know the game came out in December, but I just finished it. So we're going to jump right into this conversation. This is a really interesting video game. It's a really interesting genre, and I'm kind of worried that the art of this video game has been overshadowed by the drama surrounding the development and the buggy release. So I think first we're going to have to kind of discuss the negatives about this video game that everyone's probably familiar with already. Capitalism is the main character in Cyberpunk 2077, but was also the main character in the development of Cyberpunk 2077. CD Projekt Red is a great video game studio. They produced the Witcher Trilogy, which is an incredible series of video games. If you play video games and you haven't,
I will say, with as far as the Witcher Trilogy, it gradually got better. I played the Witcher Trilogy almost backwards. I played the second Witcher first, which I actually really enjoyed it. Then I played the third Witcher and was just blown away. And then I went back and played the first one because I got it on Steam for like $1. And I was like, oh my God, Geralt, what happened?
Dude, you know what? Like, I played the second one first, and then the third one hadn't come out yet, so I thought I'd play the first one. And I was like, oh, it has realistic fencing. And then I started playing, and I'm like, oh God, it has realistic fencing. Oh no. No.
Yeah.
So, sorry, go ahead.
Go.
I see we got our first comment. Golden question: is Cyberpunk genre a realistic outcome of unfair capitalism? We are definitely getting to that, WizBiz. We're totally going to get to that. But first, I'm going to discuss the negatives about this game and some of the things that led to its development. Famously, you can find all kinds of videos about this on YouTube right now. CD Projekt had about 6 or 8 years to develop this video game. So you'd think it would be complete, great, and ready to go out the gate. Not so much. They only developed it in total for about like 4 years of serious development, and that led to a lot of crunch and a lot of features that were incomplete in the game. So I'll discuss that first off. There are a lot of bugs on the console version. I'm going to encourage you to play this game, but do not buy it on a console. I'm told it's basically unplayable on a console. There are a lot of features that are cut down. The food stores are all basically the same. They don't function like they were intended to. The city doesn't have a lot to do other than the quests, but there's so many quests that didn't really bother me. And then there are a lot of features in the famous E3 demo that did not make the game. And that's kind of a product of capitalism because they sunk a lot of money into the development of this video game, and they postponed the release multiple times. So ultimately they kind of screwed themselves in that they had to release something immediately in December of last year, and they did it, and it wasn't complete. That said, they're patching it. It's getting better, and I haven't had any problems on the PC, and I know that's kind of like a snobby PC gaming master race thing to say, but I'm having a great time. So maybe get good at capitalism and invest in a good PC, or don't. Either way.
I've been feeling that lately because I bought Valheim on a friend's recommendation, that new like Viking Minecraft game. And he's like, yeah, it'll run on like almost any system. Will not run on my system.
Oh, brutal.
And I looked it up and I'm like, okay, I make all the systems qualifications except my graphics card. So I got to get this kind of a graphics card. Let's see. Oh my God, that graphics card is $200.
Thank you, blockchain. You can't get a good graphics card right now.
Yeah. Is it blockchain? Is that why?
Well, yeah, people buy the graphics cards in a very cyberpunk move to mine Bitcoin.
Oh God.
Which is a very, very, very cyberpunk thing.
And that's kicked me in the soul.
Yeah, dude, they've been hoarding it for like 3 or 4 years, which is again super cyberpunk thing to do.
The internet was a mistake.
The internet was crypto was a mistake. Two mania kids, but I did actually want to discuss the game, and one thing I have to kind of get out of the way because it's actually Trans Visibility Day, is that there was a lot of negative feedback from the trans community about how the character creation in this video game was handled. I'm a cis white disembodied voice. Brenton's a cis white not disembodied voice. He can wave to you. I can't. I have a medical condition. So I'm not going to go too deep into that, but CD Projekt really should have done better on that, and they didn't. And that was a big letdown. So the negatives are now out of the way of this video game, mostly. And we're going to get into discussing this piece of art and how it kind of relates to us, and how sci-fi is a reflection of the society that produced it. So Brenton hasn't played this video game, and I don't think you're familiar with the universe.
I am apparently in the video game. 2 people have sent me screenshots of me hanging out.
Yeah, I'm going to try to find that screen grab as we're talking too. It's going up. This is a really interesting and deep universe that's like almost 4 decades old. Mike Pondsmith, the guy who created it in like the late 80s. So it was created in that like Johnny Mnemonic neuromancer era of science fiction, where we were talking about like late capitalism back during the Cold War, and we're still talking about late capitalism in the 2020s. So it's kind of interesting. The game itself takes place in a place called Night City, which is a planned community that's built over the top of Coronado Bay. Mm-hmm. The city is completely privatized libertarian dystopia. So the city itself is a corporation run by Knight Corp, named after Richard Knight, the dude whose brilliant idea it was to make a giant planned industrial community over a beautiful part of California, if anyone's familiar with that.
So like Levittown, only somehow worse.
Much worse, because it's just skyscrapers and private industry everywhere. The city itself was founded in the 90s in this game, and we're in 2077. So we have a better part of a century of development of this city, and it is exactly the kind of capitalist dystopia you think it is. The city itself is a corporation. The police are a corporation. Oh. The infrastructure is all corporate. The city government is nominally handled by Knight Corp, but in fact, it's actually handled by giant mega corporations, which dominate everything. So we have Arasaka, which is the evil, well, they're all evil, but the most evil corporation, which is a giant weapons manufacturer and tech development firm run by a guy trying to make an immortality chip who is a World War II Japanese fascist veteran. So that's a lovely company. Wouldn't he have already found the immortality chip if he was alive in 2077 from World War II? We're getting into that. That's a big part of the story, actually. We have Militech, which has replaced the U.S. military as a private corporation. We have Biotechnica, which is exactly what it sounds like. It actually grows food. And we have Kang Tao, which is the mega corporation that's replaced the Chinese government. And these are all the kind of governing... Yeah, these are all the kind of governing bodies of Night City. So we find ourselves put into this town as a kind of low-level hood named V. And you have 3 choices to start off the story. You have the Corpo Rat story, where you're a low-level intelligence operative working for the Arasaka Corporation, carrying out murders of European Space Agency officials to secure contracts. We have the Street Kid, which I, as a New Yorker, had to pick, where you're just a lowly little street punk. And we have the Nomad option. And the Nomad option is interesting because in the world of 2077, the US has completely splintered into different like little warring factions. And you don't actually have like interstate transit that's safe anymore because everything's privatized. Mm-hmm. So these Nomad clans have risen up and become kind of like the armed Mad Max UPS couriers of the wasteland that's outside of the city.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
You know, that's potentially the most realistic thing about it.
It kind of is, man. Like this game is like intensely realistic and intensely depressing at the same time. So it was right up my alley.
So you essentially decided to play as a crust punk.
Yeah, basically, yeah. They actually have a word for that in this universe, and they call it kleptopunk.
Klepto. Oh, because you steal stuff.
Yeah, you steal stuff.
That's nice. You know, I've got some friends who are crust punks and former crust punks. A buddy of mine, he crashed at C Squat in New York City, and then at a Red Sty for quite a while. Interesting guy, Maoist actually, and I would say like there is a strong vein of like leftist libertarian and communist radicalism like within those communities, like as they are now. You know, there is also like, there's also like a lot of freeganism where they're stealing their food from dumpsters and, kind of following sort of the Abby Hoffman steal this book lifestyle, which makes sense if you make them kleptopunks?
Kleptopunks, yeah. I've just uploaded a little screen grab, and it didn't upload too good of my little awfully dressed dude.
Oh my god! I was wondering what that was. This is your character.
This is my avatar at like a lower level. I'm like dressed like a awful Joker.
Yeah. That doesn't jive with the. I gotta say, it looks great, but it doesn't jive with the crust punk aesthetic. You need a lot more pins. You need like a very large face, giant beard, and you should be like painfully drunk.
that is actually kind of a negative in this game. I'm going to change it, and I kind of figure out how to make it bigger. I actually did wind up as the smooth criminal towards the end of the game.
Yeah, because I remember one of the crust punks that I knew from OWS one time. He he got super drunk at Occupy the DNC back in like 2012. God, that was a long time ago. And he came up and was talking to me and my buddy Yoni, and he's like, "Hey Yoni, what are you? What's your political affiliation?" And Yoni's like, "Oh, the narco-syndicalist." And he goes, "Oh yeah, narco-syndicalist. Like he lost the ability to speak and was just vaguely gesturing about Yoni not like organizing properly with him, and his face turned like beet red. And so that forever is my image of like a pseudo radical crust punk. I hope you like pooped on a cop car or like chucked a Molotov at stuff at some point.
So the story of the game for me started as a street kid, where I'm hanging out in a terrible bar in the Hispanic district of the city. There's multiple districts of Night City, which I should probably explain. We have like Santo Domingo, which is a terrible rundown like hovel that was supposed to be a suburbia, which is dominated by a Make America Great Again type militia gang called the 6th Street Gang. We have Pacifica, which is actually my favorite district. It is a resort community that was intended to be built to be the Disneyland of Night City, but they ran out of money. And now Pacifica is a giant war zone that's being fought over by multiple gangs. The Scavengers, which are Russian mafia dudes who will go around and actually literally harvest the cyber augmentations off of people and sell them on the black market. Right. And then they're fighting the Voodoo Boys, which are a Haitian gang of hackers who are trying to work with rogue AIs to take over the internet. And then they're also fighting a gang called the Animals, who are doing like bull shark testosterone in 2077 to become like giant roid monsters. And Pacifica has no cops, so Pacifica is just a terrible war zone.
My question with the roid monsters, do you like get extra points? Can you take them out easily by shooting them in the knees or something?
You know what? They did actually do a really good job of that. I spec'd out to be like a really big gun guy, so I was kind of like maiming and murdering people horrifically in this video game. They're also super vulnerable to hacking, which we're going to get into a little bit too. But the other districts are the city center, which is actually really nice and where all the corpo headquarters are. We have Westbrook, where my street kid was actually from, which is kind of like a sort of a ghetto. It's divided between like little Tokyo, where a Yakuza type gang holds sway, and an abandoned industrial sector of the city, which is dominated by a gang of cyber psychos called Maelstrom, who kind of have a mentality that metal is better than meat and will just replace massive chunks of their body with cyber augmentations.
Oh, I thought you meant like first you were like metal is better than, and I'm like, oh, there are a bunch of metalheads. And
no.
and my brain was like, they They eat metal.
Well, they would if they could. They actually have a punk band in the game that's a Maelstrom band called Tinnitus. That is actually a metal band that changes their lineup every show. And
Tinnitus is a good name for a band, honestly.
it really is, man. I'm angry I didn't come up with that.
Yeah.
And then we have Haywood, which is the Hispanic district of the city that's dominated by the Valentino gang, which is exactly what they sound like. And then Watson.
Which,
yeah, they're cyberpunk cholos. And then we have Watson, which is another kind of a ghetto district.
Wait, what do you mean cholos? What's the difference? Because I was thinking they were like like freaking wannabe mobster guys.
No, they're the Mexican gang.
So, the Mexican gang. What was the name?
Valentinos.
Oh,
yeah, it sounds like they're Italian.
That does sound Mexican. Okay, I was thinking we were talking like like
tracksuits and sausage.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no Italians in this game, and the only guy who smokes cigars like your favorite disembodied voice here is evil, which really kind of annoyed me because cigar smokers are always evil, and I'm smoking a cigar while I'm playing the game. But I feel personally attacked.
I wonder where that came from. I know that once people began to figure out how bad smoking was, it became a common trope to make someone smoke to show that they were villains. But then and then things relaxed on that, and then sort of I guess it was like a cigarette is evil, so a cigar is even more evil, even though I would argue cigars are probably better for you than cigarettes.
This is a little aside, but it kind of came after World War I because cigarette smoking became much more popular than cigar smoking and rolling your own after World War I because you couldn't roll your own tobacco in the wet trenches. So the common man came home and smoked cigarettes, while the rich man who stayed behind the lines and didn't have to sit in the mud was smoking cigars. And it actually works very well in this setting because the people who are smoking cigars are very rich and they're showing off their luxury of being able to get tobacco. Because this is a world where climate change has completely ravaged the entire planet to the point where if you're listening to the radio in the car, they'll point out that Alaska is the new grain harvesting capital of the United States.
Oh my.
So this is like a very hopeless setting. And in this setting, we're dropped into a low-level punk named V, who meets up with a guy named Jackie Wells, who's another low-level punk. And you get hired for your big break in this world because you're a couple of people called solos who just basically do mercenary work in the city because there's no restrictions on any of this. Night City is a giant hellscape where you can buy assault rifles, fully automatic machine guns, smart guns, grenades, whatever at your local corner store.
So ANCAP Paradise.
ANCAP Paradise. There's actually a really cool vending machine in this game called Budget Arms, where you can buy a $90 disposable plastic pistol, like just out of a vending machine. And I'm not in favor of gun control, but Night City desperately needs it.
Well, it's funny because you mentioned that all the police are privatized in this future, and in reality the police, that's how the police started. In the North, it was in the South, they grew out of slave catching organizations, but the formal police forces in the North didn't really become a thing until the Boston police. And the whole reason they became a thing was that the shopkeepers got sick of having to pay so much for protection of their shops that they got the bright idea to offload their costs onto the taxpayer. And so you've got ANCAPs who are like, oh, this would be so much better, so much more futuristic if we moved to private police. And no, we tried that. It was horrible. That's why they're not private anymore.
And it's horrific in this universe too, because if you watch the television in this game, which I actually did because I really love cyberpunk dystopias, they actually have Night City police giving you advice about what to do. And it starts off with one where it's if a person has gone insane in the store, hide behind the local security turret, wait for the police to arrive. Okay. Then they advise you to get a turret in your house and always have a shotgun handy. And then they have the little video where the cute little anthropomorphic pug gets pulled over by a policeman. And they're like, don't look the policeman in the eye. Don't talk to the policeman. Just do what he tells you and then tip him for pulling you over because he's a private entity.
Oh, God.
Yeah. So this is the universe that we're dropped into. And we're at the bottom of the rung when we get dropped into this universe. Because no matter which life path you pick, if you're a street kid like me, you start off broke. And the street kid V is coming back from Atlanta because he thought he would find opportunity in Atlanta. winds up back in Night City. Corpo V gets screwed over in a game of Corpo espionage, loses all of his money and augments, and starts at 0. And Nomad V is running from his past, so he has no cash anyway. So we're people that don't matter in this universe at all. And we get dropped into the lowest rung on the lowest ladder of this universe. And our first job is to recover a wealthy woman from a group of scavengers who have kidnapped her to harvest her expensive bio augments and sell them on the black market. And instead of calling the police, they call in mercenaries, because she has a thing called trauma team, because of course everything's private in Night City, including ambulance service. So if you want ambulance service, you have to pay a premium to a group called Trauma Team, which will swoop in with an armed gunship and armed soldiers to extract you if you get wounded.
So what, we got a job with them at the lowest rung?
Yeah, her beacon for Trauma Team got turned off, but our fixer knows where she is. So she sends you and Jackie into this apartment to clear it out. And our first introduction to how horrific Night City is when we go into this apartment. There's just bodies that have been dissected and stripped of their cyberaugs all over the place. We find the woman, Sandra Dorset, in a bathtub full of ice, getting ready to get harvested. We take her out, and the trauma team shows up, puts a gun in our face, and takes her away in an ambulance. Wow. Yeah. This is a game, and I'll say this about like RPGs. A lot of people role play RPGs and do a no-kill run. I don't do that. Everybody dies in Cyberpunk because they're all awful, and it's terrifying.
Is there the possibility of a no-kill run?
There is absolutely the possibility of a no-kill run. You can shoot for the limbs and just down somebody. You can use your quick hacks, because everybody's connected to Wi-Fi, to short somebody out and just like stun gun them, basically. I don't do that. I don't believe in it.
Well, unless you're like trying to. There was a guy, if I'm not mistaken, who with Fallout 2, one of the things he did was he made sure to solve every single problem in the game with non-violent means, but also killed every child he came across.
That sounds about right. Yeah. Those kids are really annoying.
Artistically level of being a dick.
Yeah, you can't kill kids in this game, and I found that out by accident, because I had a stray bullet go and hit a kid. And I'm like, oh no, I'm a monster. But I'm like, oh, thank God I can't kill children. Once we do that first job, though, we get a little bit of notoriety, because Night City is a world where if you do it, you have to do it in the most flashy way possible to get noticed. Because late capitalism, everything's the same. All the food is basically like prepackaged corpo trash that they market to everybody. All of the clothes are dominated by corporations. So to stand out, you actually have to go and do stuff, which is an interesting little tidbit for the late capitalist setting.
Well, that's an interesting thing just for city living in general. Like,
it is.
I won't say that there wasn't, to a certain extent, part of the impetus to become very outspoken about my developing anarchist politics in New York was a way to simply differentiate myself from every other artist in New York. There's ways that people who need attention have to go about to get it with as large a population that we have, especially when not only is it a large population, but it's like jammed into a very small space. So what's this picture you're showing to everybody?
Oh, that's just the skyline.
Oh, when you're uploading these, it's just appearing.
Yeah, I'm trying to make it bigger, and I don't know how, because I'm a boomer.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, so I mean, standing out in the city living, New York City for 10 years, it's really, really interesting, because people would say that New Yorkers are rude. New Yorkers aren't rude. We're tired. We're
you need to get out of the way.
Yeah, and all the freaking tourists are walking in a line, blocking the street, looking at every freaking building while I'm trying to get to work. Move out of the way.
and CD Projekt actually did kind of a good job about that in this game, in that if you're in the more crowded districts, the streets are full of people. They don't really have like the unique crowd algorithm that they promised, but it feels like you're actually in a city, because there's other games like Skyrim where there's like 12 people in Skyrim and everybody else is a bandit. But In Cyberpunk, you really feel like you're in a city of millions of people. I've seen a comment. One thing that's interesting about Cyberpunk is that it appears there's a strong workforce instead of everything being automated. Yeah, that's true. Because this city is like a meat grinder for people, because the corpos won't spend money on a robot when they can get some street punk who will do it for a few bucks at the same time.
Well, isn't that great?
Yeah, this is not a world that you want to live in. It is an awful, awful world, and it's super interesting because it's reflecting a lot of things that are going on right now in our world.
As good art usually does.
As good art usually does. And but after we do the job with Jackie to rescue Sandra Dorset, we get just enough notoriety to be noticed by a fixer. And fixers are people who work with corporations and criminals and regular people to get jobs done, because there's no police. You can't really go to the government for help. So you have to scrape up some money, go to a fixer, and they'll hire a mercenary to do your job for you. So
kind of like a logistics company.
Yeah, basically, exactly. And there's multiple fixers for each district of the city. We have the one that we get noticed by is named Dexter Deshawn, who's our cigar smoking bad guy. He's trying to get on his way up, and he's organizing a heist. And he thinks you and Jackie would be perfect for the job. And if you've played the game already, great. If you haven't, spoilers ahead. The job is to rob the heir of the Arasaka Corporation of a computer chip. And you think, well, easy enough, right? But you have to break into the most secure hotel in the city. You have to break into this dude's apartment, and you have to rob him of his chip. And he's guarded by one of the most impressive security forces in the world, and a legendary mercenary figure named Adam Smasher, who's a completely full cyborged out tank. So,
why is there not like a post-punk singer named Adam Smasher?
You would think, right? Like, that would be perfect. Adam Smasher is probably the most evil character in the video game. His philosophy literally is metal is better than meat, and he refers to people as effing meat. Or he only takes jobs where he's guaranteed collateral damage, that he can just go and kill civilians. It's an awful, awful human being. And this is what you have to break into rob.
I like the symbolism there, because, again, what they're talking about is the same thing that, Charlie Chaplin was talking about with regard to fascism. But there is this kind of, and we talked about it with like Destiny, and some of the ethic that he and his fans had, the scientism. But like, even if you go back and you watch The Great Dictator, Charlie Chaplin's famous speech at the end, where he talks about machine men with machine minds and machine hearts. So any kind of good, gritty sci-fi, it's going to, if it is skeptical about technology, it's going to not just make that theme inherent within the story, but it will also make it inherently visual. So having the guy checked out with all the bionics, and having, he wears his ideology on his sleeve. And so that's really interesting. There's a very nice flourish on their part, because then you have it working on two levels. And writing tip: anytime you can have something work on multiple levels for your story, you're making something really good.
Yeah, and to break in, we actually have to get augmented ourselves. We have to install basically an operating system in our brain, and we get a free upgrade for our hand where it manages recoil on firearms. I see B in the Hive has to take off. Are there Cobra Kai there? Yes, there is a Yakuza gang. Yes, they are exactly as stereotypical as you think they are. They're tiger claws. I call them kitty claws. I stole that from my friend. They have the fluorescent tattoos and the katanas and everything. So there's your answer to that question. But
I would figure that Kreese would fit in very well.
Yeah, absolutely. There is actually a reference in Pacifica, because there's a melee weapons dealer that has like a dojo, and there's no mercy written on the back of it. And there's a lot of little Easter eggs like that. Nice. But when we break into the hotel, we do so with the aid of a sex worker who's working for the heir of the Arasaka Corporation as kind of a girlfriend experience. Mm-hmm. And in Cyberpunk 2077, the U.S. government in the 2020s fought a massive war in Central America to actually wipe out coca and marijuana. The war ends, and this is kind of going to be important in a minute, when they abandon the soldiers and private contractors in Central and South America, and they have to walk all the way back. But they wiped out drugs. So the new drug is something called a brain dance, where somebody records an experience, whatever an extreme experience. We actually are introduced to it when we do a brain dance of a guy robbing a grocery store and getting shot. And then people experience those through cyberware like a drug. So this sex worker actually records the guy's security for you, and you get a layout of his apartment based on that, which is kind of a
really interesting. I also, as a writer, I'm a little horrified at the prospect of being able to distill experiences down to those exact experiences.
Yeah.
Kind of what writing does in a capitalist, society. Like,
yeah, Adorno would not be surprised.
It's one of the things that I learned in my screenwriting classes, essentially, was that oftentimes movies, they have a whole section called like the promise of the premise, and screenwriters will talk about feeding the genre beast, because if you go to see a Disney movie, or you go to see like The Hobbit or something, or the next Doctor Who movie, or some Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, something like that. One of the key things that the movie is inherently saying with its advertising is that it will produce a specific emotional experience within you. And if you as a writer, like, one of the things that you have to do, you can get away with a lot, but you have to feed the genre beast. You have to deliver that experience that they want. If the experience is someone riding a spaceship very quickly and saying "yeehaw," you have to have that scene. If you're doing Guardians of the Galaxy, you're trying to do like some sort of a takeoff on Star Wars. So if you tell a Star Wars story where someone does not do the equivalent of flying a spaceship really fast and saying "yeehaw," you get a bunch of people pissed off because they feel like they paid for something that they did not receive.
Yeah, and that's a thing that's present in Night City, because we don't get a lot of the culture industry in Night City. We get the news and some commercials, but the billboards and advertising, which are ubiquitous throughout the city, are the most extreme example of culture industry advertising. There's the famous one of the trans woman, which I don't really want to get into because it's not really my remit, but my favorite was the advertisement for cyber augmentation, where there's a guy that it says, "Do you hate your meat?" And it's a guy tearing his face off to reveal a Terminator underneath. All of them are like super sexually charged. There's one that's advertising a replacement for your male equipment, if you will, which actually leads to a funny side quest where you get a guy whose augmentation is malfunctioning and you have to drive him to a doctor. And he's like, you're running across a crosswalk and there's kids crossing, and he's like, run him over, man. It's like it's in a pencil sharpener. This is a terrible world. But back to the heist. We're doing this heist, and we break in, and the heir to the Arasaka Corporation, who has a bad relationship with his father, who's about 150 years old at this point, has stolen this chip, and we're trying to steal it from him. But his father, Saburo Arasaka, arrives to take the chip back, and we have to hide in a TV screen, basically, in a little cubby. And as we're doing this, the heir to the Arasaka Corporation, Yorinobu Arasaka, strangles his father to death in front of us and says he was poisoned. And because he's so rich, there's really nothing anyone can do about it, and that's the official story. We break out of the hotel. Everything goes wrong. There's a massive shootout, of course, because it's a video game and shootouts are fun. Our friend Jackie gets killed. The container with the biochip gets damaged, and we have to put the chip in our head. We meet with Dexter Deshawn, the fixer. He's really angry because the richest man in the world has been killed on this heist, and there's nowhere he can hide. So he tries to kill us by shooting us in the head. We wake up in a junkyard a few hours later. We're salvaged by Saburo Arasaka's former bodyguard, who himself is being betrayed by Yorinobu Arasaka. And he takes us to a doctor, and we get fixed up. But as we're out cold, we have a flashback to a memory that's not ours. And that memory is to one of the most important characters in the game, Johnny Silverhand. Johnny Silverhand is what's called a rocker boy. In the world of Cyberpunk, which was a pen and paper game, we have different classes. Solos are what I kind of spec my character out to be, where you're basically a mercenary. You have netrunners, who are hackers, who are basically, I guess, would be a wizard in D&D. We have corpos, who are businessmen, and we have rocker boys. And Johnny Silverhand's the archetypical rocker boy. Rocker boy is kind of like basically a bard. Johnny was in a very popular band called Samurai, but he was also a veteran of the Central American War, and he hated Arasaka. So he's basically a rock and roll star who actually goes on commando raids.
Oh, so he's like the guy from Rage Against the Machine.
Yeah, basically. And he's played by Keanu Reeves, famously. And Keanu does a great job. They recorded a lot of cool lines for him and a lot of mocap for him. But we flash back to a raid that Johnny did on Arasaka Corporation in 2023 when he raided their corporate headquarters during a global corporate war. And he actually nuked their headquarters in Night City in 2023. And he's killed in the process. But we have this weird flashback to him, right? And we wake up after our head wound in our apartment, and all of a sudden Johnny Silverhand appears there, because it turns out that the biochip that we've put in our head is designed to reanimate a corpse and overwrite the consciousness with the consciousness of someone who's been copied onto the chip.
And he was the one that was copied onto the chip?
Because he was the test subject. And we have the game doesn't actually give you a timer, but we're told that we have a small window before Johnny's consciousness overwrites our consciousness and he gets the body. And that's the conceit of the game.
That's horrifying.
That is horrifying. And it leads to some funny moments, because the first time V's talking to Johnny in public, he's speaking out loud, and Keanu actually corrects you. He's like, "You don't have to talk out loud. I'm in your head." People think you're crazy.
Do you like him taking over your body? Is he an antagonistic force? Like,
so at the first time you meet him, he's really pissed off because he's woken up after 50 years and all of a sudden he's in somebody else's body. Over time, Johnny decides that he doesn't want to take over your body, but the product that he's in won't actually let you stop.
That's what I figured. You don't want someone as likable as Keanu Reeves to be the demon trying to
take you over. So he's trying to help you get the chip out of your head. And the rest of the game is contingent on V trying to get the chip out of his head, having various attacks and seizures as Johnny's consciousness is kind of overriding his, and going on this crazy adventure. But the antagonist of the game is ironically a capitalist product. It's a product for immortality. The antagonists of the game are the corporations that made it. The antagonist of the game is the very setting that we're in. That's this capitalist dystopia that's devalued us to the point where we're a literal body that's a product for a rich person to achieve immortality through.
Of course. So that's the immortality product? It's you jumping through other people's bodies a la Get Out?
Yeah.
Well, that's horrifying.
It is.
It's really interesting too, because Alan Watts talks a lot about the positive aspects of death and like the reasons why you would want to die, and simply being the case that the longer you spend in the world, like the less magical everything seems to you because you've encountered it before, and the more bored you get. So like the whole point of death is it's the forgettery to life's memory. So you need memory to have experiences and to have a sense of self and to experience the world, but you also need death so that you can forget it and reset again, and look at the world with new eyes each time. So I thought that was a really beautiful sentiment. And it seems like there is definitely in certain people, especially people who are very afraid of death, usually fascists and the like, this kind of insane desire for permanence. And it manifests itself for like a lot of conservatives with nostalgia. And of course, then the politicians and various hucksters take advantage of people's nostalgia to indoctrinate them into far right ways of thinking. And ultimately, what it seems to come down to is a fear of death. So if the primary antagonistic force is capitalism overcoming death by subjugating the new generations to the rule of the old, literally by having the elite take your body That's a fascinating thing to play with, and it gives you a lot to do with science fiction. Like, I don't know if you've ever did you ever watch Dollhouse? It had like 2 seasons.
I'm not a huge Joss Whedon fan, so I kind of missed that one.
For good reason.
Yeah.
I will say he's again, he can be a damn good writer when he wants to be. Dollhouse did some really good sci-fi around that because you could load other people's personalities into a body.
Well, that actually happens in Cyberpunk as well, because there's a scene where you have to infiltrate a brothel where you're trying to find the sex worker who helped you set up the heist in the first place. And I actually kind of screwed up a little. I'm a very straight dude, and they tell you to pick a sex worker, and they tell you to pick Angel or Sky. And I assumed Sky was the woman, and Sky was the dude. I'm like, oh no. No. And but the sex workers in this game, they don't actually have consciousness or agency once you hire them. They have augments in their brain that actually overwrite their consciousness with your subconscious desires while you've paid for them.
That's horrifying.
It is horrifying, and everybody in that brothel got shot. But
because that was your subconscious desire?
That was my subconscious. I was like, okay, no, this is awful. Everybody's going. And I'm not good at stealth. But yeah, that is a thing. And if you spoiler alert here, if you pick the Corpo ending and you side with the Arasakas, Saburo Arasaka's backup is actually uploaded into his son's brain, and he survives by taking over the body of his own son.
You know, this almost reminds me a little bit of the plot of Sekiro.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, because in Sekiro, spoiler for anybody, like again, it was people trying to achieve immortality by sacrificing the youth, essentially the new generation or the next generation. And so, like, when you get to the temple of the monks, like, there's just all of these pinwheels and all of these Jizo statues indicating dead children. And, you know, even with regard to like the main character of the game, you are protecting and trying to, reclaim, instead of a princess, it's a immortal child whose uncle wants to use his immortality to essentially bring back the past. So, yeah, I can see how, like, this again, I think, is a very natural theme that I'm seeing across a lot of fiction, and I think it probably has a lot to do with the fact that the millennial generation is as screwed as it is.
I think it does. Yeah.
Yeah, and the boomers are, still overly comfortable for the most part.
Well, I mean, think of the symbolism of Saburo overriding his son, like, in our context. Like, the boomers are still kind of in charge of us, even though we're adults now.
Yeah.
So it's very, besides being obviously kind of reverse Oedipal complex, it's very relevant to us. Gosh, I had it and I lost it. I'm sorry, guys. Live YouTube.
Marco, Johnny is awesome. I let him have the body.
Oh God. So that sounds very, if you don't have the context, it sounds like Marco's got some alternative lifestyle choices, which are totally valid and acceptable. But at the end of the game, spoiler, if you don't do the Corpo ending and you're a smart person, you find out that the chip has overwritten you to the point where your own consciousness is an intruder in your body, and you have 6 months left to live if you stay in the body. And if you let Johnny have the body, he can live a normal life, and you can upload yourself onto the internet and be an AI on the internet. Or you can let Johnny have the body.
What I wonder about, honestly, like the idea of uploading yourself onto the internet. So one of the things that I don't think people realize when they think about their mind and they separate their mind from their body is, even just slight changes in body chemistry will totally transform your sense of self and, like, your awareness. Anybody who's ever, engaged in hallucinogens can know this, but not just hallucinogens. Stomach wounds can do it. Like injuries to the brain or to the gut. Certain diseases make someone more prone to depression, for instance. So I really wonder, like, even if you could go and upload someone's brain, like, and their personality into an AI without your physical body there, I don't know if that would really be you.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that, because there's a character that goes through that in this game. Another flashback we have is Johnny's girlfriend being kidnapped from a gig that he played, and Johnny Silverhand is a typical narcissist, and he it starts with a sex scene between him and the girlfriend, and he's looking in the mirror at himself instead of at her. This is a very Johnny moment. But she gets kidnapped because she invented the program that actually rips people's minds out of their head and uploads them onto the internet. Johnny tries to rescue her, thinking that he's doing the right thing by unplugging her from the computer, but her consciousness has been uploaded into the computer, and by unplugging her, he killed her physical body. So from 2023 to 2027, or 2077, excuse my awful English, guys, he or she, Alt Cunningham, has existed on the internet and has completely lost all traces of her humanity. So
wow.
So the few times you talk to her, she's predicting your speech because she's reading you like data instead of talking to you like a person. You try to tell her a joke and she like doesn't really react because she's just code now.
That's horrifying. And I guess that's what awaits you if you let Johnny have the body and you become the AI.
She explicitly tells you that she's going to, because Arasaka's been taking people's minds off the internet, because this is a Decker kind of universe. So you're decked into the internet when you go onto it, sort of like Neuromancer, if you guys are familiar with that. They've been stealing great hackers' minds for decades, so they have a prison of souls essentially, and her goal is to jailbreak the prison of souls and merge all of those great minds onto one super AI, which is her. So she explicitly tells you that you're going to be a part of her if you go on the internet, or Johnny is going to be a part of her if you choose to live the 6 months and go onto the internet. The characters in this game are really, really well written. Johnny is an interesting character to talk about. We've been going for a while. Are you still good to?
Yeah. Keep going.
Outstanding.
This is fascinating.
Yeah. So Johnny is an aged rocker. He's transported 50 years into the future. He's still super popular in Night City because his band Samurai was the popular punk band against the corpos back in the 2020s. He's still popular after he nuked the city. Just think of how unpopular corporations are now. Like, people don't really like corporations. We're forced to deal with them. But think of how unpopular a corporation would have to be to get nuked, and the terrorist who nuked them is still popular 50 years later, and people think they're jerks. So that's how evil Arasaka is. So he's transported 50 years into the future, and he's trying to wage the same people's war. He actually explicitly says it's like kind of a people's war against the megacorps that he was in 2023. There's an interesting series of quests where you can actually reunite his band 50 years later. You got Johnny, who's in your head, and the other bandmates aren't privy to this. You have Carrie Eurodyne, who is the male love interest in this game, who's gone on to have a successful solo career, but it's all corporate kind of produced music, and he's very unhappy, to the point where when you go into his mansion, it's a mess. He's considering suicide. He's just by himself with all of his money. You have Bess Isis, who is a blonde white woman who picked the worst stage name ever, whose actual name is Nancy, who's become a reporter. You have Danny, who's a drummer, and she's actually gone on to have a successful solo career. And then you've got Henry, who's a drug-addicted bass player who is a nut job. And as you're trying to reunite the band, you go to Carrie. You let Johnny play the guitar and play his signature riff and explain the situation to Carrie. Bess agrees after you rescue her from Maelstromers, because she's trying to report on Tinnitus, the band I mentioned earlier. But the impasse comes with the drummer and the bassist, who used to have a thing. And when you tell the drummer, the bassist, the drummer's in on it, he dumps a load of concrete in her expensive pool. And you have to pick which one of them will play the gig. And you can actually play a rock gig with this band in the game, which is a pretty cool thing. And it kind of shows us that, like,
kind of Bill and Ted there a little bit. With
a little bit, yeah. And it kind of shows you that, like, there's a lasting impact that art has on people, because Samurai was kind of the last independent band in this universe that actually had kind of a legitimate artistic message. And even 50 years after Johnny dies nuking a building, they're still super popular in the city. You see their merchandise everywhere. You see people wearing samurai jackets. You see their records are still in stores because in 2077 hipsters still exist, and you would definitely prefer vinyl.
It just sounds better.
It just sounds better. It sounds better than that MP67 or whatever it is by 2077. But we see Johnny kind of as this aged rocker in a world he doesn't understand, and we see V trying to preserve himself, but at the same time he's kind of showing Johnny what the world looks like 50 years after his what he thinks is his heroic sacrifice. But it's really nothing's changed, and that kind of shows you the indomitable will and enduring power of corporations. I sound like a hippie. Corporations, man. But I believe it was Rawls who proposed.
My shirt is hair, by the way.
Yeah, I believe it was Rawls though who proposed the property monster, where as opposed to the utility monster, which we discussed on the breakdown on the debate that we did the other day, the property monster is an immortal being that has the capacity to acquire all the property. So these corporations have essentially acquired everything, and you have no actual method to oppose them. And even after Johnny nuked their headquarters, Arasaka endured. And even as you're gunning down like droves of their thugs, they endure. And there's nothing you can actually do to bring the corporations down, which is kind of like depressing, but it's actually really great storytelling in the game.
I'm sending you, by the way, in the private chat, the private chat that no one else has a link to, a article from the Anarchist Library for Johann Most's
was it Most
of property?
It was Most. It wasn't Rawls. Okay, my bad. So it was an actual anarchist and not not a liberal philosopher. Wow, there's a shocker.
If I recall, a friend of mine that I'd worked with, he actually edited and released an audiobook using his voice to read that essay. And I remember, like, I was even he and I were listening to it, and we're like, man, Most is pissed off.
and you know what, the people in Cyberpunk 2077 are all universally pissed off. Like you can talk to anybody on the street and they'll give you the canned line, but the one that stuck out to me was I clicked the talk button on a child and he just looks up and he says everything sucks and started walking away, and I'm like, oh my god,
he's not wrong.
No, he's not. The side stories all have really interesting. All the hundreds of quests in this game are all kind of tiny contained stories, but one of the ones that stood out to me was a guy bought a garage, but he didn't realize he was leasing the equipment from a corporation who foreclosed on his garage. Which caused him to go over the edge and set landmines everywhere and kind of hole up. Because in this world, you basically have to have cyber augmentations to compete in the economy. Regular flesh and blood humans just don't do it anymore. So you have to have internet connection in your head. You have to have speed boost in your legs. You have to have lifting boosts that allow you to lift like more weight than is physically possible for a human. But the cost of this is that there's a condition they call cyberpsychosis, where as you get more and more metal replacing your flesh, you're more and more likely to essentially frenzy and go insane.
Yeah, because again, you are not your mind, you are your body.
Yeah, and as you replace large chunks of it,
yeah. Your ego is not actually real. It doesn't exist.
And when these people go crazy, they're also heavily augmented, so they're very difficult to stop. One of the longer series of quests in the game is to try to subdue them, subdue a bunch of cyber psychos alive so they can be studied. And it's not the government that does it, because there's no government. It's not a corporation doing it because they don't care, because people will keep buying their cyberaugs. It's a fixer who's really angry that this is happening and tries to do something about it.
An activist, an annoying activist.
Exactly.
Well, this is fascinating. It kind of does make me want to play the game, to tell you the truth.
I highly recommend it if you have a good gaming PC.
It reminds me a little bit of, because I watched Blade Runner 2076, and I watched it in like 4X. Have you ever done that?
I love that movie, and yes, I have.
Yeah, I watched it in 4X by accident. I just was like, oh, Blade Runner is out today. I think I should go see it. here's a showing. What the hell is 4X? I don't care. I'm going to go in. So I, paid my extra money and went to sit in the theater. And suddenly the seat starts moving and it starts spraying me with air and water. And I was like one of 5 people in the theater. This was here, Union Square, and I just kind of said offhandedly, like, I just wanted to see a movie. I didn't realize I was in the front seat at a Gallagher show. But the 4X actually worked really well once you got past the demonstration and actually went into the actual movie. It did an excellent job of really setting the scene.
Yeah, and it was an incredible movie, and it got kind of savaged by the critics very unfairly.
I think any film that tries to, follow up a classic Cyberpunk 2077 would not exist without the original Blade Runner.
Not at all.
Which, by the way, to this day, I think the title of that movie is Blade Runner because the phrase Blade Runner sounds really cool. It has nothing to do with his job. His job is not blade running. There is no blade involved, though there is some running.
Well, I guess they kind of reference that in this because they call mercenaries in this game edge runners.
Edge runners, yeah.
Yeah, and you can there's actually a couple references. You can find a body that looks exactly like Roy Batty's, and there's actually a Batty's Hotel in this. There are Blade Runner references in this game. There's also an awesome Breaking Bad Easter egg where you can find
2049, not Blade Runner 2076.
Oh, yeah, right. It is Blade Runner 2049.
Oh my god, I got Blade Runner 2049 confused with Cyberpunk 2077, confused with Fallout 70.
So many numbers.
Oh. So, all right. By the way, we have a comment here. Tell him about the father and son BD team.
Oh God, that's a disturbing quest. Okay, so you're hired to basically take revenge for the murder of a child.
Okay, that's already triggering me.
Yeah, and the 2 guys who murdered the kid recorded it as a brain dance, so people could buy it essentially to experience it. And when you walk in, if you're me, when you gun down all of their henchmen and walk into their studio, the guy, the father says, "Oh no, we were forced to do this." And then the son says, "Hey, do you want a brain dance? I have stuff with animals and children that you can buy." At which point the shotgun came out and exactly what you thought.
Well, good.
Yeah. There are no good guys in this universe.
That is incredibly frustrating. But yeah, I mean, I get that they're doing the world is terrible, and this was created in Trump's America. So
it was, and it is awful. But there are that said, there are little specks of kind of goodness in this game. The heterosexual romance option is with a character called Panam, which is kind of mixed because they did very much objectify this female character. But I'm sorry, I saw this comment. Before I praise the game for having bright spots, I'll tell you about the darkest quest in the game. There's also a mission where you nail someone to a cross. It's absolutely true. You're hired to take revenge for a murder, and it turns out the murderer is on the equivalent of death row in 2077. Mm-hmm. And he has basically sold his body to a movie studio. And he's going to sell the experience of being crucified to have people feel the redemption arc. And
would he really, just because he's being crucified?
Well, he's experienced a genuine religious conversion.
Oh, okay.
So he the first time you meet him, he's going to the sister of the man he killed to apologize, which he does.
I assume she didn't take that well.
No, she actually forgives him.
Oh.
Which is kind of touching. And then he informs you that he's going to be crucified. The studio exec who's sitting in your ear is like, "Don't talk him out of it." And then later he calls you again. You go to the movie studio, and he's chosen you to actually nail the nails into the cross.
He chose you to be Mel Gibson.
He tells you to be Mel Gibson, and it is disturbing. And they don't give you an inch because you don't just push a button and let the scene go through. You have to push the mouse each time he nails the nail into the cross. and Johnny's reading religious scriptures in your head as you're doing it. So he's basically reading, I think it's John as you're doing it, and it shows you the commodification of human life in this universe because it's a hit. You hear it later on the radio that this brain dance is a huge hit, and
well, it's nice that you contributed.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, just think about like just capitalism now and how we've commodified like violence and killing and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because people tend to be very fascinated with violence. It's the same reason why there's always money for war, but there's not money for education or healthcare or any of that shit.
Yeah.
Because humans, our animal brains react much more to certain things. It's the same reason why, for instance, the color red will stick out to us. The only color that sticks out to us more than red is white, and it instantly will pull our eye directly to it because our animal brain recognizes that, hey, that may be blood, so pay attention.
Yeah, and that base commodification has completely taken over by 2077 in Night City.
What I always think of is, okay, so domestic turkeys are super dumb, like really dumb because of how they've been bred for over the years. But one of the things that will happen with turkeys is that if you make a fake female turkey head, like just like out of plastic, but you make it look enough not like a female turkey, and just stick that head like in the turkey run, the male turkeys will make mating passes at the head as if it is a real woman. And this seems really dumb until you consider the porn industry.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh
no, we're just as dumb.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they do give you kind of hopeful endings if you pick the right endings and you free the prison of souls. It kind of puts a dent in the Arasaka Corporation. So at the very end of the game, you get a little bit of hopeful messaging that you can actually kind of make a difference. But at the same time, the corporation still exists. Everything's still privatized, and like the degree to which your actions mattered are debatable. And
also, like, what's going to happen with this hive mind?
Yeah, what's going to happen with this hive mind? Because you meet a guy whose job it is to basically protect the internet from rogue AIs, because they've uploaded basically a giant firewall to keep AIs from just dominating the internet. Because everything in this universe, from grenades, which seems like a terrible idea, to cars, to radios, to computers, to people, is connected to the internet. And if these rogue AIs run the net, they can hack literally everything on the planet and essentially become gods. And it's a dark and disturbing realization when you realize that that's kind of lurking beyond a firewall in this universe.
Well, that's fascinating, and I love sci-fi world building. One of my big questions here is, so the game seems to have a very interesting plot. I'm recognizing some of the themes. I've seen them before, but this is an interesting new way of approaching them. Like, how do you feel this works as an independent piece of science fiction?
It relies a lot on cliche that's happened for decades in the sci-fi industry, but I think it works really well. I think they realized the world. I think the way they built the city as this kind of organic creature, like trash everywhere or with like giant corporation skyscrapers, really works. The characters are extraordinarily well written. I think they could have done more to make the city feel more alive, but I think it works really well because all the character work is done excellently. All the voiced characters who are involved in major quests are believably written, from the nomads whose motivation is kind of preserving their clan and making money, to the awful people making brain dances of murder, to Johnny, who's this aged rocker at a time, to even V as the player character. You have agency as the player character, but V is a character who's experiencing emotions, and CD Projekt does that really, really well. I think they've realized that excellently, and I think.
So I have a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
With regard to this particular society where everyone is very like plugged in, and you can't act within the economy without plenty of cybernetics, do they have an equivalent of people who reject that and are seeking for something more, I guess, authentic? as you know, a rejection of that kind of thing is just as much a part of human culture as the actual thing. Do you ever get inklings that there's that in this world?
Not really. There's a few people who aren't like super chromed up, as they say in the game, but it is such an element of the economy in that game. It'd be like seeing somebody without a cell phone now.
Oh, savage.
Yeah, it'd be weird. There are a few people that you can't hack because they don't have like cyberogs, but there's no like organized opposition to it because it's just a huge part of the economy.
I feel like there should be, or even
that
if
would be a
there's
good
not,
idea.
like even let's say, for instance, that the economy makes it impossible for anyone to not be plugged into the grid. There should be a group of people who think that they're being more in tune with nature or whatever. In much the same way that, you've got like vegans and stuff and hippies. Like, I really feel like it would be very interesting to see someone who's like teched out beyond anything we can imagine in 2020, but thinks that they're like doing like the real down to earth stuff, man.
Yeah, there's like the poor are kind of like that because they can't afford the augmentations, because you see a lot of really poor areas of Night City, but even then they're buying like laptops. They're trying to hack in. There's a random kind of little hidden away loot drop that I found where a guy's living in a shipping container on top of a pile of trash, and he found a modem to jack into the internet. You find his journal, and they're saying, the person he's talking to is saying like, "Oh, great, you can make like enough money to live for a month by selling that." He's like, "No, I'm going to plug into the internet. I always wanted to plug into the internet." And you find his dead body because his brain has been fried by a hacker on the internet.
Poor guy.
Yeah, poor guy. Yeah, so like the theme of this game isn't that there is an escape. This theme of this game is that there's really no escape.
Mm-hmm. So it's kind of almost like Dark Souls.
Yeah, a little bit.
In the sense that like with Dark Souls, the whole Dark Souls is, very Buddhist inspired in a lot of ways. It's also inspired by reading and understanding only part of Western fantasy novels at a time.
Yeah.
But like you get the impression throughout the games that you can either repeat the cycle of light and dark, or you can let dark win, but then light will just reemerge anyway. So you just repeat it backwards. And then like the quote unquote good ending in the third is that you find a way to essentially harvest the dark soul to give to this one character within the painted world, which is like a world that's been literally like painted on a canvas that people who are too bummed out by the regular Dark Souls world to live in get sucked into the painting and live in the painting. And it's pretty nice in the painting, but the painting at this point is rotting and being destroyed. And so like you have to get the dark soul to be the pigment that will be in this woman's paint when she paints a new world to live in. And then the old painting will rot away. So, like even the escape is not really an escape, and the world itself just basically continues to go through cycles of sucking and nothingness. It's upbeat. It's exactly what you would expect from a game called Dark Souls, and I suppose this ending where you're not quite sure if you had a major impact, is. It makes sense for a game called Cyberpunk 2077.
There is one ending where you can kind of go with the nomads, and they tell you they're going to get you medical attention, and you leave Night City. And leaving Night City, there's a giant militarized border checkpoint for the city-state. So there's actually like Trump's wall gets built, I guess, in 2077. But as you're leaving, you realize you only have 6 months to go, and so like you might have left, but you haven't really escaped even then.
Because you're just going to die, or Johnny is just going to take over your body?
Well, no, at that point, Johnny's been ripped out of your body, but your body views you as an intruder, and you have 6 months to go before you basically break down.
Oh, well, make it a good 6 months.
Makes it a good 6 months. That was my choice, too. It's kind of cool if you pick the let Johnny have the body option, because it humbles him, and you take this narcissist who craves fame, kind of, and he changes into a very humble man who just wants to live simply. And
good for him.
he takes a bus out of the city into the Midwest.
I'd have done the same thing. All right, so that sounds freaking cool. Thank you for involving me in this. I will probably not be playing the game anytime soon because now I have to upgrade my computer to play Valheim at some point.
Well, whenever you upgrade your computer, it'll probably be patched and all the DLCs will be out and it'll be a completely different experience. So
yeah, well then maybe if I can get a hold of a decent graphics card away from a Bitcoin miner, you monsters.
Yeah.
I will see about getting it. If I can squeeze that in between writing and my fatherly duties.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a time sink, man. If you play the whole game, you're gonna dump like 100 hours into it. If you just do the main story, you'll probably dump about 20 hours.
Okay, not too bad. I tend to be a completionist in RPGs. You mentioned something about food, by the way, not working. What was that about?
Oh, they advertise like working restaurants, and what you get instead is just like a menu. But they do actually do a kind of cool thing with the food in that like the poor people are eating like prepackaged food substitutes in the future, and like real water is like a commodity, real fruit is really expensive, but everyone's eating like beef jerky that they don't know where it comes from, or like, and it's in quotations, milkshakes in like a bag, like tomato substitutes in like a tiny little baggie. So imagine if like the food supply collapsed and it's like Judge Dredd, like eat recycled food, it's good for the environment and okay for you.
Horrifying.
Yeah.
There was, it was funny because one of the things that drove me crazy in Skyrim was that like, and this is, the backpacker in me, I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, you shouldn't be able to jump into freezing cold water and be okay. Also, I should have to camp and I should have to eat. So like I downloaded a bunch of mods to Skyrim that basically added these tasks where I had to carry around a tent and light a fire and stuff whenever I wanted to sleep outside, and like I had to use the fire to cook, and I was just like really enjoying it. And I'm like, wait a minute, I can just go camping.
You should play New Vegas on survival mode.
Okay, I'll check that out.
Yeah.
I have played New Vegas before, and it's enjoying a resurgence since what was it? H Bomber Guy did a video about how great it is.
Yeah, he's right. Well, man, we've been going for about an hour and 10 minutes. If you guys have enjoyed my rambling, subscribe, give it a like. Thanks again for coming on the channel, man.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're okay with it, I'm going to rip this and put it up on my channel as well.
Yeah, fire free, man.
Absolutely, yeah. So if you guys are interested in me, check me out. My name's Brenton Lengel. I am the author of Snow White Zombie Apocalypse. And by the way, I have signed the Darude film option.
Oh,
so
dope.
I'm going to be getting a little bit of money, which is exciting. And hopefully they can actually get the movie made. So it's very, very exciting, and the comic book is on its way. Please check it out. And if you haven't already liked and subscribed to me, please go do that. I just finished a debate with Destiny, and Bobby was an excellent sort of wingman to critique my performance afterwards.
I still hope I wasn't too hard on you, man.
No, you weren't. You weren't at all. And, like I said, I expected to have some rhetoric issues because, it's freaking Destiny that I'm up against. Really good at it. All right. I will catch you guys later. Bobby, I guess you can sign us out.
All right, guys. Thanks for sticking around. If you're listening to this later or on SoundCloud, you didn't get to see my awful, screen grabs. But thanks for sticking around. If you're watching this later, like and subscribe. There'll be more content coming. Check out Brenton if you haven't. And this is the Mustache Mafia podcast signing out.
Peace.